What is up guys, Jarv here, back today jumping into Destiny 2. Now in today's video we're taking an in-depth look at Stasis, and not just the element, but actually each and every class and their abilities. So if you want a full breakdown of what to expect ahead of Beyond Light, then this is most definitely the video for you. Now if you enjoy the video, be sure to leave a rating down below, that super helps me out here on the channel. And if you're new here, want to keep up to date with all the latest Destiny 2 content, then be sure to hit subscribe as well. But without further delay guys, let's jump into the video. Now before we jump into the meat of this video today, I want to first invite you once again to the community hub over in Discord. We have nearly 2,500 community members now and amazing guardians with an excellent LFG that's growing and buzzing ahead of Beyond Light. So if you want to get things done and finish things out before the end of the current season, then be sure to hop in. It's available to everyone and you can find the link to the Discord down in the video description below. Now with the channel announcements out of the way, let's jump into the meat of our video today. And we're going to first take an in-depth look at exactly what Stasis is. It's an entirely new elemental power being introduced with Beyond Light on November 10th. So with this, as well as new abilities, we're likely to see new elemental weapons as well. Now all of the new abilities are focused around 3 key areas. Now the first one we're going to look at is Stasis Field. So this is where the odds are evened by slowing enemies in a stasis field, and then you aim down your sights at your next target. And the next area is Freeze, and this is where a frozen foe is a conquered foe, and you can control the battle by immobilizing enemies in a solid stasis state. And the third and final area is called Shatter, and this is where you can use stasis crystals to shatter and erupt and damage those unlucky foes that find themselves encased in a solid stasis state. Now those 3 areas form the foundations of all the subclasses that we're going to be seeing in Beyond Light. Now before we delve into each and every subclass, it's important to understand exactly how a stasis subclass works. Now unlike the current subclass trees that we have in Destiny 2, Stasis allows you to add aspects and fragments. Now aspects will grant new abilities and fragments will allow you to modify those abilities, giving you a passive benefit as a result. Now aspects are physical items that you can find out in the world, and these can be things from crystallized Vex confluxes or a robotic fallen arm for example, but for whatever they are, they can be equipped as well as mixed and matched by the player. Now not every aspect inside Destiny 2 will have the ability to equip a fragment, but many of them do. Now fragments are also physical items which can again be found out in the world, and as I said before, these will provide a passive benefit, sometimes with a stat deduction, which can further enhance the abilities and allow for further customization options. Now naturally, locating all these aspects and understanding their benefits as well as the fragments that you can slot into them is going to be key come Beyond Light. So stay stuck to the channel and I'll keep you up to date as I find them once Beyond Light becomes available. So that's a quick overview of Stasis and how a Stasis subclass will work when Beyond Light launches on November 10th. But let's take the time now to take a close look at each and every class specifically. Now we're going to start off with the Warlock, and this is called the Shade Binder. Now these are keen masters of destruction, launching projectiles, freezing as many enemies as possible and shattering them all in one fell swoop. The Shade Binder ensures no foe is left standing. Now much like the current Dawnblade, this subclass has the ability to have a very long ranged melee attack called Penumbral Blast, and this is where it fires stasis projectiles from the staff that explode on impact. Now enemies hit by the crystal shrapnel are also immediately frozen solid in stasis. Now the Warlock continues to have the regular Rift abilities that it has now, but you can augment additional aspects into this to modify it further, and a great example of this is the Frost Pulse aspect that you can find out in the world and equip. Now what this does is by casting your Rift, it generates a shockwave that will freeze nearby combatants. So as well as providing the benefits that a traditional Rift applies, you can also freeze your combatants in stasis. Now as we mentioned earlier, you can further modify this aspect by adding a fragment. Now the one we see here is called Whisper of Bonds. By defeating frozen targets with weapons, that will grant you super energy, and there are deductions to both intellect and discipline of -10. But a great one to consider pairing with the new Frost Pulse aspect is called a Whisper of Refraction, and this replenishes some of your class ability energy upon shattering enemy combatants. So this creates excellent synergy, and if you play this right, you can use this combination very frequently indeed. Now the main super for the Shade Binder is called Shatter Shockwave. Now the Shade Binder detonates the crystals on their staff, creating a devastating shockwave that shatters all nearby frozen combatants. And as we can see, this is very powerful and can be paired very well with other abilities from other classes to devastating effect. So that wraps up the Shade Binder for the Warlock. The next class we're going to take a look at is the Titan, and this is called the Behemoth. Now Behemoths are both high offense and high defense, creating solid stasis crystals that provide cover or platforms for which you can leap during your super. Behemoths can jump higher, faster and further with unlimited melee energy and high damage mitigation. And much like the Warlock, the class ability for the Titan is likely to remain the same as the current class abilities with the barricades as we have now. But much like with the Warlock, aspects and fragments are likely to be equipable to further modify this ability. And this is very much the case when you look at the Behemoth's Shiver Strike, which is the charge melee ability for the Stasis subclass. Now the Behemoth summons Stasis gauntlets and lunges forward with explosive speed, smashing through anything in their way. Upon reaching their target, they unleash a devastating jab that sends their foe careering backwards while slowing nearby enemies. Now here we can see an example where we can use an aspect to further modify this ability, and this is called Tectonic Harvest. Now by shattering a Stasis crystal, this creates a Stasis shard, and shards grant melee energy when picked up by you or your allies. And if used correctly, especially with groups of foes, then you can potentially have your melee charged very often. And you can pair this as well with something called Whisper of Durance. Now this is where the slow abilities at the end of this charge melee can last longer, and for those abilities that linger, their duration will also be increased, and you'll get a buff to your strength of +10 as well. Now when it comes to the super, the Behemoth super is called Glacial Quake. Now the Behemoth compels stasis energy to attach to their body, covering themselves in frozen darkness and forming stasis gauntlets on one hand, increasing their damage resistance in the process. Now with this active, you can use a slam called Ground Control, and this is where the Behemoth slams a gauntlet into the ground, sending out tremors of powerful stasis energy that leave crystals in their wake and freeze all enemies in the vicinity. Now when the Titan super is active, they're able to run through any frozen enemies, creating a field of destruction in their wake. But you can combine the ability of your charge melee with your super to create some finesse in your play. So for example, you can cancel out your slide into a massive stasis powerful leap to only cancel that, and at the right moment direct a Behemoth downward with a devastating slam. And with the Hunter specifically, which we're about to cover, we learn a little bit more about some of the vertical abilities coming in Beyond Light as part of the Stasis subclasses. And that moves us nicely onto the Hunter. Now the Hunter's Stasis subclass is called Revenant. Now Revenants are worthy allies in any battle and summon the storm, use it for cover and lure enemies inside and then unleash destruction. Now we're going to start off with the Revenant by looking at Withering Blade. This is the Hunter's charged melee attack, and players can throw deadly stasis shurikens into the fight, and these ricochet off surfaces and enemies, slowing and damaging them along the way. And if you land 2 on the same target, that enemy will be instantly frozen solid. Now since the Revenant was revealed and specifically the freezing and slow effects of this particular ability, it'll be interesting to see the impact on the Crucible once this goes live. But be sure to let me know your thoughts on this ability down in the comment section below. Now as we previously mentioned, Stasis also adds some verticality when it comes to their abilities. We touched upon it a little bit with the Titan, but we get to see it here with the Revenant, and this is part of the Stasis aspect called Shatter Dive. Now when you activate this in mid-air, you quickly descend and shatter nearby targets on impact. As well as that though, we get to see another fragment called Whisper of the Hedrons. This will pair perfectly with the Withering Blade ability because you gain bonus to weapon damage after freezing a target with stasis. And this brings us nicely onto the Revenant super, and it's called Silence and Squall. So channeling stasis shards towards them, Revenants form Karma Blades and use them to unleash lethal 2-pronged attacks. Now this is broken into 2 sections, so we have a Deadly Edge. So upon impact, the first blade shatters and sends out a wave of stasis energy that freezes any enemy in the surrounding area, and that's quickly followed up by Stasis Storm. So the second blade hits and creates a violent stasis storm that hones in on nearby enemies, slowing, damaging, and eventually freezing them in stasis. So all in all, the Revenant very much has the ability to slow down the battle, and that's going to have interesting effect not just in PvE but also PvP. And as I said before, be sure to let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. Now the final section we're going to be covering is the grenades. Now these apply to all 3 classes that have stasis subclasses when Beyond Light launches. Now the first one is called Glacier Grenade. Now upon impact with the ground, a wall of stasis crystals instantly bursts from the earth and nearby enemies are frozen solid in a stasis crystal. Now these grenades have multiple uses from encasing enemies to creating cover should you need it. And when destroyed, the crystals will create an area of effect burst damage to any nearby enemies. Now the second grenade is called Cold Snap Grenade. Now upon impact with the ground or an enemy, this grenade unleashes a wave of stasis energy that races along the ground in the direction of the closest nearby enemy, freezing them and searching out for the next nearby foe. You can freeze up to 3 enemies in a single Cold Snap grenade. And the third and final grenade is called Dusk Filled Grenade. Now these create powerful stasis fields that suck enemies into them when forming. Once an enemy is caught inside though, they will be slowed, and if they're unable to make it out, they'll be frozen solid in stasis. Now this is the first time ever that all 3 classes have the same grenade abilities, so this is the closest thing to balance I guess we have within the Stasis subclass. But let me know your thoughts on all 3 of those down in the comment section below. So there we have it guys, an overview of what Stasis is as an element, but also what it means as a subclass, and each and every subclass that we're expecting to see when BeOnline launches for the Titan, Warlock and the Hunter. Now if you have enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a rating down below, that super helps me out here on the channel. And if you're new here and want to keep up to date with all the latest Destiny 2 content, especially with the run up to BeOnline fast approaching, then be sure to hit subscribe as well. I'm going to jump back into the game as always guys, but I will catch you all again very soon.